Watch The List tonight at 7 on News Channel 5.
Today on Katie, the epidemic of teens and alcohol abuse.
Did you have any idea that he was drinking?
Parents who lost their son, shocked at what they found out.
They drink it in a water bottle, in their Gatorade. They may have it in perfume bottles.
What they want you to know. Then, we're shining our spotlight on Academy Award winner Cuba Gooding Jr.
50 movies later, did you have a favorite?
Cuba on his latest film based on a true story. From Studio One in New York, it's Katie.
So much for coming. I'm so happy to see you. TGIF, right? And lots to get to. We have a great show today. First of all, happy birthday to First Lady Michelle Obama. She turns the big 5-0 today. Looking incredible at 50. She stayed a few extra days, apparently, in Hawaii to hang 10 with her girlfriends. That was an early birthday gift from her husband. He has the right idea. At this point, you want to spend time with your girlfriends, right? And the White House, meanwhile, is hosting a big dance party on Saturday night in her honor. Was anybody here invited? I know, neither was I. I guess our invitations got lost in the mail, right? But we do hear Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg has been practicing her twerking. So it should be a really good time. Anyway, happy birthday to Michelle Obama. You know, a lot of people can relate to Michelle because she has teenagers. And as parents, many of us struggle to have those big conversations with our kids about things like drinking. But those conversations are so important because, sadly, alcohol is still the most commonly used and abused substance among teens in this country and contributes to more than 4,000 deaths every year of people under the drinking age. For Dr. Brian Heflinger and his wife, Cindy, this devastating statistic became their reality.
Brian was a typical firstborn child, extremely responsible.
Is everything that you could ask for in a son?
He had straight A's, a 4.5 GPA. He was always striving to be better, to give out his best and try his hardest. That day was a Friday.
My son Kevin was playing basketball, and then we stayed for the varsity game, and that's when Brian and his friends would show up. And it was so nice to see him over there with friends, you know, having fun. Little did we know that was the last time we'd ever see Brian alive. I heard the doorbell ring about 1 o'clock in the morning. When I opened the door, 3 of Brian's friends were standing there.
They said that he had left a party and they couldn't find him.
He drank. I trusted him implicitly. There was no reason to think that he would drink and drive.
I knew something was horribly wrong. The phone rang, and it was a friend of mine, and she said, "Cindy, there's been an accident." We went to the hospital, and the attending trauma surgeon met us at the door. He had tears in his eyes, and I said, no, it can't be Brian. He's a good boy.
And he just said very softly that Brian's dead. I cannot describe to you the sickening feeling to know that your life has changed forever in one moment. It was just a numbing feeling of disbelief that your son is never coming home with you again.
Please welcome Dr. Brian Heflinger and his wife, Cindy, who live outside Toledo, Ohio. Thank you both so much for being here. And first of all, it's been less than a year. Our deepest condolences to you and your entire family. I know this is so hard. Why did you want to be here today?
To bring a new awareness to the problem of teenage drinking, that so many good kids are dying because of this, or being injured, or being raped, or just, it just needs to change. There needs to be a new awareness to this problem, which is rampant in this country.
Cindy, I know you obviously and your son were extremely close. Did you have any idea that he was drinking?
No. As a matter of fact, Brian had always been against drinking. And knowing that viewpoint, it never occurred to me to ask him. And I think if I would have flat out asked him, "Are you drinking?" that he wouldn't have lied to me.
In the aftermath of this, what did you learn about sort of the level of alcohol abuse going on in Brian's high school?
It's just rampant, and not just the drinking, but what they're drinking and how they're drinking.
You know, they drink quickly over hours, and you know, binge drinking is the most prevalent form of drinking in teenagers. I mean, 90% of them, that's when they drink alcohol, they binge drink.
Well, Brian's younger brother, your son Kevin, is a sophomore at the same school Brian attended. He is here along with your daughters, Julie and Christy, and must be very, very difficult, obviously, for the three of you to have lost your big brother in this tragic way. And Kevin, I'm just curious, after this happened, did attitudes seem to change at your high school?
Well, at first they seemed to have changed, but after it just took like 1 or 2 people to start drinking again within like a month, and then everyone went back to the status quo of drinking again, and it didn't, now you couldn't even tell there was a change.
How, you know, your parents have both used the word rampant, but how widespread is it?
It's everywhere. It's not just, once you're introduced to it, I think the older kids introduce it to the younger kids, and then they're hooked to it, and it's just everywhere.
And that's where the cycle has to break, I think, because 26% of 8th graders have been drunk, and they look up to the juniors and seniors, and the juniors and seniors drink. If we can get the juniors and seniors to set an example for the younger kids will stop drinking. And then when they're seniors, it'll just all fall into place. I think you think it's never going to happen to you. And we're living proof that it can happen to you. And we don't have a second chance, but everybody else has a second chance. And I think what we're doing is trying to let people know you have a second chance to talk to your kids and bring this awareness to them, you know, not to drink, and bring it out in the forefront.
I know that you all now go to high schools and you talk about what happened, try to educate kids about this. You've also written a book called The Night He Died.
And reality of teenage drinking, right? And
there's a website you've established called brianmatters.com. When you go and talk to these kids, what message are you hoping to deliver?
Try to have fun without drinking. There's so many other things that you can do without drinking. And when we talk to the kids, we try to show them graphically through Brian what can happen from one night of drinking, show them the statistics of all the things that can happen to you by drinking, and try to make them realize that there's no benefit that comes of drinking other than you feel good for an hour or two and then it's over, you know.
And how your death or injury can so horribly affect so many other people, your family, your friends. And kids don't think, they think they're invincible. They think that what they do, what they're doing, it doesn't affect anybody else, but it does.
They're very self-focused, and you're right, they think they're immortal. And it is a lesson for all of us that you never in your wildest dreams imagined that you would be in a hospital and hear this about your firstborn son.
Who we all looked up to, who his brothers looked up to, friends looked up to. He'd always been a mature, responsible kid, wiser than his years, who always made good decisions. And what we've been telling the kids when we speak to them, once you take that first drink of alcohol, you're not making the decisions anymore. The alcohol is.
Brian and Cindy, thank you so much for coming in today. We really, really appreciate your telling your story. Thank you. And up next, we're going to be exploring further whether the drinking age should be lowered from 21 to 18. We're going to hear both sides of the debate. That's right after this.
Still to come, how to talk to your kids about drinking.
At what age should you start?
Plus, incredible time and money saving ideas you'll love.
How about that?
There you go.
That's so cool.
That's coming up.
And welcome back, everyone. Today our our big conversation is so important. It's about teens and alcohol. In most states, you become an adult at 18. You have the right to vote, enlist in the military, purchase cigarettes, serve jury duty, and even become independent from parental control. But one thing you cannot do at 18 is legally purchase and consume alcohol. The U.S. is one of only a handful of countries where the drinking age is this high. Should it be lowered? Please welcome John McCardle, president of the University of the South, Sewanee, Tennessee, and founder of Choose Responsibility, and Jan Withers, president of Mothers Against Drunk Driving. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
You know, I've wanted to have this conversation for so long on the show because obviously underage drinking is a huge issue in this country. And I know the whole debate began with something that you wrote, John, in the New York Times, quote, "The 21-year-old drinking age is bad social policy and terrible law." Why?
Very simply, because it isn't working. The rate of binge drinking that is occurring among college-age students has not budged in the 30 years that the law has been on the books.
Because it's been since, what, 1984?
1984. And as a result, drinking has been forced out of public places and out of public view, but it is still taking place in more high-risk locations, behind closed doors, underground, and we shouldn't be surprised as a result that we are seeing less responsible behavior.
Why do you think lowering the age, I mean, can you tell us specifically how making it 18 is going to change those circumstances you just described?
Well, you cited some of the reasons in your introduction. These young people are adults in the eyes of the law. Furthermore, in most of the rest of the world, as you pointed out, the drinking age is lower than 21. The United States is one of only a handful of countries as an exception to that law. Out in the open is better than behind closed doors, and we should treat alcohol education the way we treat preparing young people to learn how to operate an automobile. We don't simply toss them the keys to the car on the day they become of legal driving age. We educate them and we license them.
Jan, I know that you very vehemently oppose lowering the drinking age to 18. Why is that?
To begin with, my own daughter was 15 when she was killed by an underage drinking driver. He was 17 at the time. And so this is a very personal issue for me, too. The reason MAD opposes this and supports the 21 minimum drinking age law, and I personally do, is because it's one of the most research-based laws that we've ever had. When they abolished prohibition, basically the minimum drinking age was 21. And then during the Vietnam era, many states lowered the drinking age because people could go off to war, and so they lowered the drinking age to 18 in many states, and the death toll just skyrocketed, and the country reversed that and went back to the other, and as a result of the law raising it back to the 21 minimum drinking age, we've estimated that there's 25,000 lives that have been saved since then.
John, how do you argue with that?
Well, alcohol-related traffic fatalities have indeed gone down in the 30 years since the law has been on the books, but they have gone down in every age group, not simply 18 to 21. I think MAD deserves an enormous amount of credit for educating us about the risks of drinking and driving. When I was in school, the word designated driver was simply not a part of my vocabulary. Automobiles are safer now. The tolerance levels have been changed. But the fact of the matter is, more lives are lost to alcohol today off the highways. We need to address the problems, it seems to me, of 2014, not the problems of 1984.
We thought it was also important to get the perspective of two young people in this discussion. Sam Tracy is a recent graduate from the University of Connecticut and chairman of the board for Students for Sensible Drug Policy, which also deals with alcohol. And Sam, what is the drinking culture like in your school?
I was actually a resident assistant for 3 years, and so I was in charge of enforcing the alcohol policy. So I can really tell firsthand that our current approach just isn't working. Like most college campuses, binge drinking was really common, and rather than being in like a bar or a restaurant in which if you're having too much, the staff is going to cut you off, their intention is essentially to have too much, and people will be cheering them on for it.
So how do you think lowering the age will change the culture or environment of schools?
And so I think it is pretty obvious that our experiment with a national drinking age has totally failed. and that it's just driven all of this drinking behind closed doors where students are a lot more likely to overdose and a lot less likely to get proper medical attention if they do overdose.
Meanwhile, Monica Vanderheij is 20 years old. She's a junior at Belmont University in Nashville. Monica, you disagree with Sam. You do not think the drinking age should be lowered. Why?
I don't think it's a matter of maturity or responsibility. It's a matter of your world outlook. You know what you've been told what is right and wrong, but if you put an 18-year-old in a situation that is potentially harmful, you know, the girl that goes too far with a guy that she didn't want to, or some boys that get into a violent situation, you put a 21-year-old in that situation. It doesn't mean that once you hit 21, dangerous situations don't arise. You're just better equipped to handle those situations.
Well, do you think this is going to change anytime soon? I mean, you all have been talking about this for several years now. Jan, you've been opposing this for several years. What does the future portend? Do you think we're going to see a change in policy or not?
What's interesting about the law is that Congress cannot constitutionally set a national drinking age.
So it's state by state?
It is state by state. Prohibition required a constitutional amendment. What is inhibiting that discussion and that debate right now is a provision in the Transportation Act which says the states may set the age wherever they choose, but if they set it lower than 21, they forfeit 10% of their federal highway funds. End of debate, end of discussion, locked in time for all time. One size fits all based on the concerns of 30 years ago doesn't strike me as the most effective way to deal with this issue.
Meanwhile, Jan, you're going to continue to fight any efforts to lower the drinking age.
Well, indeed, for a couple of reasons. All the research is, the American Medical Association and the Surgeon General and National Institutes of Health and National Highway Traffic Safety, all the federal organizations, Center for Disease Control, they've all studied this in detail, and the results are all the same, that it's much safer to keep the drinking age at 21.
It's such an interesting and important debate. Hopefully, we presented a balanced debate here today, but we'll continue to follow this story because I think it's really, as I said, important and fascinating as well. John McCardle, Jan Withers, also Sam Tracy and Monica Vanderheij, thank you so much for your perspectives as well. Thank you so much for coming in today. We'd love to hear your thoughts, by the way, on the drinking age. Let us know what you think by going to Facebook, Twitter, or you can go to our website, katiecouric.com. Up next, a really important topic, how to talk to your kids about drinking. That's right after this.
Coming up later, Academy Award winner Cuba Gooding Jr.
You've worked with so many incredible actors. Is there someone out there, Cuba, that you just are hankering to work with?
Well, I almost got to work with Al Pacino. The last minute he went with Jamie Foxx, so you kissed my ass. No, I'm kidding.
That's coming up.
Today we've been talking about teens and drinking. It can be a very difficult conversation to have with your kids, but so necessary. In fact, the Surgeon General reports that by the age of 15, more than half of teens have had at least one drink. So how do you have that talk? Here to help us get started is Dr. Claire McCarthy, a pediatrician at Boston Children's Hospital and mother of 5. Hello, Claire. Welcome. Everyone's like, woo, 5 kids. Anyway, thank you so much for being here because I think we all need help. I think talking to your kids about this. At what age should you start?
By middle school, you definitely should be talking, but you've got to think about it before then. You've got to think about the example you're setting for your kids. So as soon as they're old enough to understand what it is you're drinking and what it is you're doing with your friends, and when people come over, you need to think about the role that alcohol is playing in your life.
And now, how can you have a conversation with the child in a way that they're going to actually listen, that you're talking to them, not at them?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I think it's kind of like talking with kids about sex. Parents think that if they say anything but don't do it, that they're giving permission to their kids. And certainly you want to talk about the consequences. There's always opportunities in the news to talk about the consequences of alcohol and what can happen. And you want to make sure that there are consequences in your family. There need to be rules and expectations around alcohol. But you've got to do more than that. And you have to give them strategies. You have to help them think through their social situations.
Because a lot of this is based in peer pressure, right?
Yes,
their friends
absolutely.
are doing it, so they feel like to be accepted and be part of the cool crowd, they have to do it.
Right.
So what kind of coping tools can you teach them to kind of fight that urge off?
Well, role-playing and thinking it through and making their evening plan is important, but I like families also to have a code word, something that they can text their parents, something random, I don't know, like truck or George or whatever.
You know, when I used to say to my daughter, Ellie, if you're at a party, you feel uncomfortable either with drinking or drugs, or you just feel like there's something in your gut telling you this doesn't feel right, I said, call me or text me. This was even before kids were texting so much, and say, Mom, I forgot to walk the dog. Then I can say to you, Ellie, you need to come home, and then you can blame everything on me.
Right, so you text that word, and then the parent calls and says, you have to come home, and they can be, oh my gosh, my mother, she's such a drag, I have to leave. And they get to save face, and they get to leave. The friends thing is really important. The #1 risk factor for underage drinking is having a best friend who drinks. When they're with their friends, all that lack of impulse control and all that peer pressure and feeling immortal kicks in.
I know when it comes to these conversations, you say there are 3 important things to remember. Start early, have an open conversation, and do it often.
Yes.
I mean, you have to reinforce this. This isn't like the talk. Yeah. I know we talked about an example earlier when I was talking with my producers. If you see an ad for alcohol on the TV during the Super Bowl that glamorizes alcohol, you have to say, hey, that looks like a lot of fun, but do you know that it can be real, you know, use it as a teachable moment, right?
Yeah, and actually there was a study that showed that middle schoolers, if they saw alcohol ads and liked them, were more likely to drink later on. So there's actual data around this. But you're right, there's so many opportunities to talk and bring it up. You've got early and often. That's what you have to do when it comes to talking about alcohol safety.
Well, Dr. Claire McCarthy, thank you so much for the guidance on this. I hope a lot of parents and kids are listening to our conversation today. Thank you. And we'll be right back.
Next, the talented Cuba Gooding Jr.
50 movies later. It's amazing. Did you have a favorite?
And later,
have you ever heard of something called a life hack?
Amazing time and money-saving tips that'll transform your life.
This is such a cute idea.
It's all coming up.